Harry and Ben were alongside on the sidewalk waiting for you, and we were there too as well. We had just met them, so that we were pickups actually. So we were talking away, and then you pulled up with the car, which you had named Cynthia, and sure enough, we stood by, and then when you saw us with the boys, you said, well, what are you going to do? It was 9 o'clock, it was late, you couldn't make a movie, so we says, well, we'll get in the car and go for a little drive. So I chose to go in the front seat because I found that you were driving, as well as it kind of attracted my eye. And I got into the front seat, and my cousin Edith got into the rumble seat with Harry. And then the next day we made arrangements to get together, and we did. We went through parts of the Miami City. It was all new to us.
Went to all my Toronto friends.
And then the next day you said that Tuesday you had a number of friends from Toronto that you wanted to arrange to see at the beach. So you asked if we should join with you and Harry, which we did. And we went to this area on the beach, and there were a number of people from Toronto. And one of them happens to be your aunt as well. She was a Schwartz, you see. And her brother...
Tilly Schwartz.
Her brother was in Florida because he'd not been well, and he had to go down to sort of get away from the winter. And so Tilly was down there help look after him a bit, while his wife was back home in Toronto running his drugstore because he was a pharmacist. So that's how we first met part of the family, the Schwartz family in Miami. And then we spent the whole day on the beach, and we had a good time. There were other people around that we made friends with. And then that night you asked if you wanted to take me to the nightclub, the Royal Palm, Royal Palm, whatever, right on was Biscayne Boulevard. And so we went to the nightclub, you and I forget what Edith was doing that night, but we went to the nightclub and we sat at the bar and we talked, and we were deciding what, you were leaving the next day, Wednesday. You had to start your trip back home again. So you said to me, if you asked me if I would consider coming to Toronto, and you said I'd like to get an overnight train ticket for you, because that was the means of travel in those days. I mean, people flew, but that was a little bit not as how should I say, common to do is to go on a bus or on a train. So I said, well, I'll think about it when I get home. And you had left the next morning hoping that I would take you on this invitation to come to Toronto. So from there, I spent the rest of my holiday in Miami. You were on your way home, and you kept writing to me each day that you were on the road till you got back home. I heard from you, and the second day happened to be Valentine's Day, February 14th. I got a beautiful Valentine card, and then things kept going. You were home, and I spent the rest of my holiday, got home, and I guess there were telephone calls back and forth, and then I had to get the approval of my mother to say, well, I guess it'd be okay if you went to Toronto. Should I continue?
Yeah, sure.
So I said, well, we don't know the family at all, and it would be best to know whether we can find out.
You forgot one thing. She was with your cousin Edith, and she gave the accent.
Oh yeah, at that point, Edith, my cousin, was very taken in with Syd as well, and she told my mother that she felt he looked like a pretty person, the type of person I should sort of pursue and go to Toronto. She thought it would be fine.
So she gave him the seal of approval.
Yeah, her approval was very, very sound and good, because she was a few years older than me, and we all felt Edith had a good head on her shoulders, which she did. So in the meantime, I had this uncle and aunt living in Toronto, so we were able to get in touch with them. And they immediately informed us that they knew the Wolfe family, that they actually lived only 2 or 3 blocks away from where Syd, his parents lived, and they had this business on Euclid Avenue. So once they said things looked very good and proper, I said I would go to Toronto. So that's how it got started. So I did come, it was about, I met him, I think about a month later, was in the beginning of March. I had gotten back beginning of February. So in March, I accepted the train ticket, and I went up to Toronto through Buffalo. The overnight train went as far as Buffalo, and then you picked up the train that left from Buffalo to Toronto. In the meantime, Syd had a sister, Lil, married about 1.5 years, living in Buffalo, and she arranged to come up for the weekend as well so she could learn more about me and meet me. So she met me at the station, a total stranger, but I told her I had described what I would be wearing, and for some reason she was able to recognize who I was. So she was there to meet me in Buffalo, and I spent, that was in the morning, so we spent a few hours. She took me back to her apartment for lunch, and then Harry was taking that weekend off as well. So he came home, and we got onto an afternoon train to Toronto. So that's how Lil and Harry came along for the weekend as well. And we got into Toronto, and I forget if I stayed at your place or with my uncle. I can't remember that part of it.
I think he stayed at our house. I think in my home, I think he stayed.
Yeah, I don't remember. Isn't that funny? That part as well is not, doesn't matter. But anyway, I stayed for the whole weekend till Monday. And then I had to go back. I had a job to go back to. So Lil and Harry, we all went back on the train. And from there, I got onto my train back to Philadelphia. And then within a month's time, I asked if he would come to Philadelphia and meet my family, which he did. So you came, you took about 2 days. You came, stayed overnight, and had a day or two with us, and you went right back home. Because you, at that time, were getting involved with putting up the Kingsway Pharmacy. And you had to get back to work and get things going. And it was the very next month when you got into the Kingsway Pharmacy, you started digging that first hole in the ground. He did, you know, Randy. Could you wait a bit? You don't want to record this, do you?
Get that back. Okay, so he started building the pharmacy.
Yeah,
he was sending you pictures.
So he took pictures from day to day as it was progressing, that I could see what was happening and to show me how things were going to be. So I had all these pictures put together, and I was getting them very regularly. And then in June, I came up to Toronto. I was asked to come up for a visit, and my mother came with me. We stayed for a few weeks at that time, and my mother stayed with my relatives, and I was with the Wolfe family. And then again, I spent out, what was a short, I forget whether it was more than a week. I can't remember that part. But anyway, I had to get back again to my work, and then Syd came in for 1 day during the summer to visit with me. It was about a day and a half, I think. You went on the night train. You had to get back again to work.
The special night train.
Yeah, and it was decided then that the opening of the Kingsway Pharmacy should take place sometime in November, approximately. And we all looked forward to that great day of the opening of the Kingsway Pharmacy. And I was, of course, to be there. And I did. I arranged to come for the opening, which took place, the exact date, I'm not sure. Was it the 15th, 16th of November? And
I'm not sure either.
but that's when it was in November, because it was a magnificent opening. I mean, you had the dean of the College of Pharmacy, and all special people came out to help you with the red ribbon, the cutting of the ribbon, and the opening of the Kingsway Pharmacy. And it was at that point, I did stay with you at your house with your family, and it was then decided that we should set the date for our wedding. And we did. We set it for January 17th.
So when did Grandpa propose?
Well, I guess all along it was the fact that I had come back to meet again in June after I had been, I saw Syd, what was it, once or twice in between, but I said in June when I came back, it was more or less understood at that point. But we didn't do anything yet, make any final arrangements, because it was important to get the Kingsway Pharmacy open. And once that was decided and we attended and everything went as planned, that's when we set the date for our wedding, once that was established. And that's when you gave me my ring as well. As well, that went along with it. So, and then our wedding was set for January, and then that's how it came within a year, I guess it was, not even quite a year.
So January 17th, 1937?
Yeah, that was the year we were married, 1937.
Uh-huh.
So that's the
size,
story.
What's today's date?
Well, it's getting close to your anniversary.
Yeah, it's
this
getting
year.
close. You'll be celebrating it in warmer climates this year.
Yeah. So that's a tall story, Randy.
Yeah. Let's talk. We'll talk first about Grandpa's family, who Grandma met when she was there.
When I first met the Wolfe family, there was his sister Min. Then Lil was married at that point. Then there was Ralph attending medical school, and Abby was just probably finishing high school, not knowing yet into what. Oh, he decided he was going to go into pharmacy. That was it. Mm-hmm. So Ralph was busy with his studies at medical school, and that's when he took ill. He had a terrible, the palsy. Was that what they call the palsy? Like a stroke, which paralyzed his whole side of his face. And it was such a terrible time at that point.
No,
And he'd been working very hard.
Bell's
palsy.
Yes.
Yeah, that's it. That's
Yeah.
it.
Did I say that?
Yeah, both of you. You got
Yeah.
half of it each.
So that was what happened to Ralph at that time. When I came, he was just getting over it. Because it was a very hard, he studied and worked so hard in those
He wouldn't walk
early
on the streets, and he didn't want anybody to see him.
Yeah,
He was a protruding eye.
Yeah, it was like one side of his face was paralyzed, and it affected his eye.
A very rough life, probably.
And he couldn't speak properly, but he came out of it. Took its time, but he was all right. And then Abby got into pharmacy, and we were married in January. Ralph was okay at that time, and the wedding was in Philadelphia. Not too many of the family were able to attend, but I think Min come down to the wedding and some close friends. And Morton Lazarus was your best man. He was working for you at that time. And a few other close friends came to the wedding.
And who was your maid of honor?
And who was my maid of honor? Let's see. Did I have anyone? I don't think I did.
No?
I'm trying to remember, Randy, because I'm thinking the bridal party. It was held.
Wasn't Edith, was it?
No, I don't recall, because it was held at the Majestic Hotel. It was a 1 o'clock ceremony. It was a beautiful setting, because that's where a lot of the weddings were held. Other than being in the synagogue, it was held here. It was set up beautifully for weddings. And I had this beautiful red carpeted curved stairway leading from the second floor down, and I walked down alone with my beautiful bouquet of flowers, and I paused midway down, and they took pictures again, and I continued walking down. and you met me at the bottom of the stairs and walked me into, they had a small chapel that was set up for weddings, especially for weddings. And it was a place where a lot of the girls had, the Jewish weddings were held there. In fact, the rabbi was one of the popular ones that did most of all the weddings at this hotel. And it was a beautiful afternoon wedding. It was at 1:30, 2 o'clock. Then I had a nice reception in their dining room where I had invited a lot of my friends because it was sort of a farewell for me, because from there on I was going to go up to Toronto to live.
Right.
So I had to see off a lot of my friends, which was a beautiful way of doing it because they all came. We had a nice reception, wine and cake and other things to go with it. And then at 5 o'clock was a sit-down dinner, more or less for the family and very close friends. And so we had a dinner at 5, and your parents were going back that same night. They had come in early Sunday morning and spent the day, of course, and then the wedding, and then at 7 o'clock they had to go back on the train, so we got them back to the train station so they could get back home okay. And we stayed on and went to the, we left after, it wasn't a late wedding, it was because it started early in the afternoon. So we went to, we were going to Atlantic City, and it was a very rainy day. It's almost like what we had here. It rained all day long.
Baltimore was so flooded.
So we went off to Atlantic City, and that was Sunday night. And Monday, we thought we'd start our trip to go south again. We were going to go to Florida. So we started the first day, and the second day. By the third day, we had rain every single day. So I forget how far south we had gotten. We decided this won't work out. So we turned around and went back to New York City. And we stayed there for a couple of days and then continued our ride back home to Toronto. So it was within about a week after the wedding that we got back to Toronto. Forget the entry date.
I think we stopped at Philadelphia on the way home, didn't we?
No, we were in New York City.
We went
back because we saw there's no point. We wouldn't make it in time. It was taking more time than we could allow for it. So we started back and said, well, we'll at least stop and stay in New York for a couple of days, which was all right. And then we came on to Toronto. From there, it wasn't too long a trip to get home again.
And then Grandpa, I guess, went back to work with the store?
Well, he went, the Kingsway, was open. And he had the Dorval as well at that point. But he had a staff working at the Dorval, and he took over in the Kingsway because he wanted to be there right from the start to make sure that things were going to get on the right foot, which he did do right. Did get off on the right foot. It's hard work, but he did well, and he worked hard for it. And we settled, and we lived in a duplex not too far from the Kingsway, so that he could get to work within 5-10 minutes time. It was out at the West End.
It was a very rough time getting a combination out there, you know, Randy.
Why?
Because they drew the line against Jews at that time.
No, true, Randy. You know, it was quite a while. He had to do it all because it was Toronto, and I was back in Philadelphia. I couldn't do anything actually towards getting an accommodation where we're going to live. So he was busy, and he was
every door you come to knock on, are you Jewish? Yep, I'm sorry.
He couldn't get rent.
This was in the late 1930s.
37.
Yeah.
And it was, he wanted to be located between the Dorval and the Kingsway because he had to spend, most of the time was spent at the Kingsway, but he still thought Dorval needed him at times. So we found a duplex about 2 blocks from the Dorval, which was just perfect for us. And it was only then that we got it just close to our wedding day, because it was getting to a point we didn't know where we were going to be living.
Yeah.
But this duplex turned up, and they were owned by Jewish people. And that's how we were fortunate enough to get
two
it.
Jewish boys, the newsboys from downtown Toronto, they bought this building as a, for as a sort of
It was a house, yeah, for rental.
That's for rental. And we had the lower part, and two Gentile people, very nice people, had the upper
Second
part.
floor. Yeah.
At the second floor.
It was a very nice duplex. It was a corner house. We had a nice little garden.
589 Indian
And
Road.
just didn't have the rooms were small, but we managed for about 5.5 years, and we stayed there.
So that's where my mother was born.
Yeah, your mom was born. We lived in the Indian Road.
And Wanda, the road.
Yeah, I forget exactly. But that's when she was born, and we stayed there until we bought the house on Windermere Avenue. And that's when Andrea came along about a year later. No, yeah, she's about 5 to 6 years younger than Carol. So then we moved into this house. It was a lovely house. We had two big bedrooms. One was extremely large, so we kept. And then when Myrna came along, we were able to keep her crib in that bedroom for a couple of years. And then we moved, I think it was about 12 years after we were married, that we moved to Avenal Drive and bought this lovely big home, which we have been in ever since, close to 50 years.
I just spent nights writing bottom lines of jingles for prizes. Get a prize. So.
Oh yeah, that when
Anyway, they have the back covers of magazines. If you write a 25-word line, finish a jingle, and you could win $1,000 prizes.
Right.
Well, we lived in a small little house then.
Do you ever hear of jingle contests on?
Yeah, I don't know if they
anymore?
have like that.
Not really, because he was excellent at it. He was very good. He used to work so late at night. He'd have a little extra time in between. So he used to write jingle, and he won them. Won several.
Business on the slow side, and lots of time to write, lots of magazines there. So I take the magazine and study it and try to supply the jingle to win a nice prize. So I learned a lesson. I think it was a Coronet magazine. I saw a man who won a big prize on a jingle contest because he knew what they were looking for. See, everybody thinks all these things, Little Red Riding Hood, this and that, and no meaning at all to these poems. They write little poems. But I realized they're looking for some hidden key that would win up a good prize. So I read about a man who won in a contest on the woman who was, they come up and see me sometime, Mae
West, yeah.
Mae West. So everybody here all right, this, that, the other thing, and it's got to rhyme with the word West, and that's all they had to do. But I dig deeper, and I found that what he said was, the girl nobody knows. Now, that sounds fun, it doesn't sound like much, does it?
No.
But how do you spell nose? He spelled it N-O apostrophe.
Nobody says
Oh, yeah.
The girl nobody knows. Nobody says nose to, no to.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So it's
So
clever.
he won a lot of money on that, and suddenly rang a bell up in my noodle head. They're looking for something that's got a punch to it, and yet not being just
that
a
was
poem.
clever.
So one day a woman had the ad was I like Old Dutch Cleanser. So the lady named